Well, as they hammer out the bailout details on Capitol Hill, we are hearing from a number of politicians this morning saying they are deeply concerned about, quote, protecting taxpayers. Well, it might be a little too late for that. Joining us now live in New York, New Jersey Congressman Scott Garrett. Congressman, thanks very much. I read your op-ed. You likened Paulson to Officer Krupke, and you're deeply concerned about the American family and taxpayers. What is it about this bailout you don't like?
Well, I think we should be concerned for the taxpayer both on the short run and the long term as well. And as was just described on your introduction here, basically what we're doing right now is giving a blank check to the Treasury. When we mentioned the $700 billion figure, that's really just a starting point. And as I said, the White House has indicated today, they're adding a greater number of assets to the book that they might buy, so that $700 billion could go to 8, 9, a trillion. There is no limit on the dollar amount, and there is no limit on the authority. Basically, the Treasury says they want blanket authority with no oversight by Congress, by the Senate, by any other government agency, not even by the courts. So this is basically a coup d'etat, if you will, by the financial sector here, by the Treasury Department, as setting up their own little entity here that can tax and spend, and no one, not the politicians and not the public, not the taxpayer, can stop it.
If there was better disclosure, transparency, and accountability, if we were to modify this, would that assuage your concerns? Well,
that's only one step, but there's even bigger questions than that. I mean, the first part is the short-term impact, and the short-term impact is spending money without accountability and potentially raising taxes. We heard Barney Frank on TV just over the weekend saying, yeah, he's all ready to raise taxes to help pay for this. The long-term effect is no one is considering, and that's the inflationary pressures as well. Economists over the weekend have taken a look at this and say, you know what? On the short term, because the economy is in the doldrums right now, you're not going to see much inflationary pressure. But when you do the bailout like this, when you borrow money like this, and when you monetize the debt like this, inflationary pressures are going to be tremendous for the years ahead.
Yeah, but Secretary Paulson said the government would recoup much of its initial investment through the eventual sale of the mortgage assets. You don't buy that?
Well, I hope everything, for the public's sake, my constituents' sake, I hope everything works out just as he said. But of course, things haven't turned out just as he said. Think back with Bear Stearns. He said, prior to that, he said, we're not going to do bailouts. And then, of course, Bear Stearns came, and that was $29 billion bailouts. And he said it at that time. He said, we have to do Bear Stearns because if we don't, what will happen? Well, large insurers will fail. The GSEs will fail. 150-year-old industries in this country will fail. Well, you know what? They did do Bear Stearns, and the GSEs did fail. They became nationalized. AIG did fail. Lehman Brothers did fail. So, you know, with all due respect to the Treasury, brilliant man, I respect him a lot, but we look at the track record of where he was and where we've been up to this point in time. Let's start looking and listening to
there are people other than Secretary Paulson, economists, experts of all kinds on financial matters, and they predict that if we don't do some kind of a rescue plan here along the lines that's being proposed, there will be a complete financial collapse of the credit markets, run on banks, and a full-bore depression. What do you think?
Well, it's not just what I think, it's what other people have said about this. You know, the president of the Federal Reserve in St. Louis said back in 2006, I think it was, that when you have a policy of bailouts today, you are going to have even more bailouts in the future. And that's basically what we've seen already. Now, we've had the opportunity over this past weekend, now that the plan is sort of out there. You know, the document is only a couple pages long. And when you think about it, it's absurd that we're considering spending over maybe $1 trillion, who knows how much, without having anything in writing as far as what the overall plan is. But we do have the outline, and over the weekend we've had some economists from around the country been in contact with us, from business schools and elsewhere, and they said, you know, you need to do something. But do you really have to put the taxpayer at risk? Are there alternatives? Steve Ford's been out there talking about, you know, having changed
We just had him on. I'm afraid, Congressman, we're out of time. Representative Scott Garrett, thank you so much.
I appreciate the chance.
Megan?
Well,